Hey guys, Occasional Gamer here. Today we're going to be doing something slightly different. If you visited my channel before, you'll know that I usually sit here, talk to myself and play some video games. Um, my other passion is technology. The usual coding, security, cybersecurity, hacking, all that kind of stuff. Um, I have decided to do a series. I'm going to basically be creating a website from scratch. Now, keeping in mind that this website isn't going to be something you're going to want to learn if you're a web designer and you want to actually serve customers with it. It's going to be extremely basic. It's the whole point of it is so I can make it, and then several parts down the line I will be hacking into it. And it's pretty much just to kind of teach myself as I go. I haven't. I'm no expert. I know a very basic amount of PHP, which is what we're doing today. Obviously, the website HTML, PHP, and SQL. So as I say, we're going to be doing something very basic. I'm going to show you how we're going to get started. You can, of course, follow this if you are looking to learn the very basics in HTML and PHP. There are far too many videos out there for me to go into depth of what means what. So, as I say, you can use this as a basic foundation for your website, but then you really are going to have to grow on it, and you'll see what I mean by that when the final product is probably going to look a shambles. As I mentioned, we're going to be programming in PHP. And for those of you that don't know, PHP is a server-side scripting language, which means we're going to need a server. This is where XAMPP or XAMPP comes in. Quick Google search and you'll be able to download this. As soon as you download it, this is the window you'll be given, and you will then be able to open up. I apologize, you'll be able to start MySQL and Apache. That is that done. XAMPP is gone away. It's minimized the system tray. Is it? Yeah. Okay. So we've done that. That's step one. Step two, we're going to have to go to C drive. And in the C drive, there's going to be XAMPP that's been created up once you install it. In that folder, there's going to be a htdocs folder. And this is where you're going to want to create a folder for your website. So as you can see there, I've named it my website. It is empty. We're going to start a fresh one. And then as soon as that's done, we can leave that be as well. So that's the server set up. That's our folder set up. So now we need to decide what you're going to be coding in. I'm using Dreamweaver. There's no specific reason as to why I'm using this over, say, Visual Studio. Dreamweaver's on my desktop, hence why I'm using it. There's nothing special about it to me. Visual Studio is better at certain things, as is Dreamweaver. So that is something I will leave to you guys. Next, we're going to have to set up the website. So new site, I'm going to call it my website. Local site folder is where we're going to have to browse to the htdocs folder that we created. There it is. Select folder and save. Oh, I apologize. If you go back onto manage sites, you can go to servers, click add, local network, and the server folder is going to be the same folder. Boom, boom, boom. So now our server's set up. We connect it. So essentially what this means for anybody that hasn't used a programming language before, PHP, as I say, is a server-side scripting language, which means that if you run it in a browser without a server, it will essentially be invisible. And I'll explain that in a second. If you display HTML, that'll explain perfectly fine without a server. So what we're essentially doing now is creating a server in which our documents will be able to run from. And that is pretty much it. And we are ready to start our website. So I'm going to create our first homepage. So as I say, for any of you that have skipped the intro, this is going to be an extremely basic website. Um, Again, it will serve you well if you're looking to start or learn the very basics. But essentially, I'm only using it is later on. I'm going to be pen testing it using Kali Linux, and I've been doing it on real websites, but I thought I can actually record videos if I'm doing it on my own website because I haven't actually got to cover anything up for legal reasons, all that nonsense. So let's jump straight back in it. Type HTML. So again, speaking to you like you know absolutely nothing at all, we have all of these things are essentially called tags. HTML tags. Type HTML defines the actual the actual file. The title would be the name of that specific page. So for example, sorry, if we put homepage, and we'll see that a little later on. If you imagine when you open up a tab in Google Chrome or something, you'll in the actual tab you'll have some writing, and that's what will display there. The title is between the two heads, as you can see. So head, and then your title. So head is also a good space in which you will use to link stuff. So you'll have later on, we'll have a style sheet that we'll be able to import. We'll talk more about that after. And then we've got our body tags, and as you can imagine, everything inside the body is what is going to be displayed on our actual web page. So even though we've got all this working, everything's connected as it should, there is still one final check you can do before you actually go and code your PHP. So as an example, if I put H1, which in HTML is a heading 1, you can have 1, 2, 3, and that's the variant on sizes. If I put hello, this is HTML. That I know when we run that will display on the website. If, however, we type in the tags for PHP, so as you can see, it's a pretty seamless change between HTML, and then PHP can literally just merge in itself. So everything between these two tags, any kind of PHP you ever do will be defined between these two tags, just as these are between two little tags here. So we put PHP echo, and we're going to put in hello. This is PHP. Grammar. So there we go. So we've got our HTML. We know that that's going to run. And if our server's working properly, this will display. If it isn't working properly, then this will be invisible. It won't be shown. So if I save that and now go to a Chrome. Okay, and in our web bar, we're going to put in localhost, which is our machine. My website, which is the folder that we created within our folder earlier on. And if we put in homepage.php, here we go. Hello, this is HTML. Hello, this is PHP. So if for some reason the server was turned off, this would not show. And PHP is going to be quite a large part of our website. So just to give you guys an idea, if I delete some of this PHP, so this is going to be just a complete trashy website, as I've said several times. So if we just create some P tags, and for those of you that don't know, they are paragraph tags. And if we click in lorem ipsum, for anyone that doesn't know, is basically, here we go, it'll tell you if blah, 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 dummy text. So it's just a load of random writing, and you can generate some lorem ipsum and just put it, here we go. So it's essentially web designers will use it to fill out a website before they actually publish it, just to get an idea of what it's going to look like. There we go. So that's kind of what it will look like. So if you imagine you're creating a actual website, in your P tags will have the about me page or content descriptions and all that kind of thing. So now we save that and we can simply refresh this, and instead of the PHP thing, we don't want to translate it, we get this. To give you another idea on some very basic HTML commands, should I say? A is anchor, so it's an anchor tag. Href, this is basically something you're going to want to do if you are wanting to link page to page. So you imagine any link that you ever click on will more than likely have to go through the ahref phase. So we've got ahref. So as you can see, I've left the 2 commas blank. That's actually going to be the name of it. So if I click in a, let's call it second page, and then we can actually call this, click the link, let's say click here to proceed, full stop. So we haven't actually created a second page at the minute, so let's do that now. New file, I'm going to second page .php, and you also need to take note that if that's a small p, that needs to be if that's a small p, that needs to be a small p. Whatever the page is, exactly how it's spelled, needs to match this. And while I'm saying that, I've noticed I need that. Second page.php. Let's save that. So even though this will be completely blank, once we refresh this, we should still be taken to second page.php. So this is going to take us from page to page within our website. Now, we're going to leave that as our main page. As pointless as that is, that was just to give you guys a gist of the very basics of HTML. It will allow you to define some kind of foundation for a website. If we go to the second page, we've got the same stuff on this page. And if we call this second page and the body. So here is now a few more things that within HTML you're going to have to know. And that is called a div ID. So a div tag is essentially what would separate sections of a website. So for example, div ID, nav, it'll make sense in a second. Div ID, content, and one final one, div ID, whoops, and we'll call that footer. Clear them up a little bit, space them out a little bit. So we've got our navigation bar. So even though this is blank at the minute, we can actually define a space for this on our blank page. So creating divs isn't going to actually create anything on our second page. So even though we've just made all that, we can go back here, refresh the second page. Obviously, there's nothing there. Div is essentially an invisible container, if you like. It's an invisible box that keeps whatever content in there will stay in this box. And then we use a scripting language called, then we use something called CSS, which is a cascading style sheet to actually style the container itself. Divs help us identify which is what in CSS, and then we will create pretty sheets. So now, second page, get to proceed, blah, blah, blah. Let's chuck that away. And we're going to have a nav bar. So the reason I'm doing this, as I've said a couple of times now, is to later on, I'm going to be running a virtual machine and using Kali to actually hack into this website. So as I'm going along, I'm going to try and think of things that I could potentially do. So we're going to want users to be able to log in and log out. Later on, we'll be able to fiddle with forms from a pen testing point of view. We're going to want a search bar, and that way later on in our hacking stage, we will be able to manipulate the database from the search bar. We'll be able to SQL inject the website, presumably, because I'm going to leave very, very thin layers of security on the website. It sounds like a nonsense project, but by the end of it, it is essentially creating my own little playground, so I'm able to actually do with what I want later on. So we've got our ID, nav, so that is where we're going to have to be creating a nav bar later on. Content is the content, and the footer. So the next file we're going to have is a style sheet, .css. So CSS again is cascading style sheets. So we open this, and as you can see, it's filled with this kind of stuff, but we can actually get rid of all this. And now we have our style sheet. So we're going to have the link rel. The link rel, and we're going to put in style sheet. So that tells it that we're linking a style sheet. The type, is it a JavaScript file or is it another file? CSS file. And then we're going to link it. So Dreamweaver kindly does that for us. Whoops. So now we can actually save that, and what that's done is linked this style sheet here to this second page here. But again, we're going to have to make sure that that's linked properly by actually implementing CSS. So to give you an idea, we've created this div ID, which is a navigation bar. So if you imagine a website, picture a navigation bar going across the top of the screen. You've got your drop down menus, all that kind of stuff. We have called it nav. So you can call this egg and chips, bacon. It really doesn't matter. It just helps define what that item is. So we're going to have to put a hash nav and two of these cool curly boxes. Curly brackets. I'm going to have to say border. That was not right. Border. So we're going to have a solid border. You can pick the color, of course, but we don't. I don't want a color. A color. Again, you're not going to see. You don't usually see borders in the way that these are going to be displayed. So we're going to have a solid border with a width of around 1700 pixels. That's a random guess. A height of around 150. Could be too small. Who knows? So, for example, now we should see a border, a solid border with a width of that and a height of that defines the nav. So if we refresh this, there we go. Just like magic. So as you imagine, it looks like a children's website. These aren't often used. Borders aren't used that often, but it kind of helps us define the outline of our website. So quite clearly, a navigation bar isn't necessarily going to be this big. Of course, you could have a logo here. You could do whatever you wanted. You could even rename this and call it your banner. So you could have a banner across your screen. If you're doing a YouTube page, you could do a YouTube website, sorry. You could put your YouTube banner over there. But for the minute, that'll do. If I literally, you alter it, you save it, you refresh the page, and it changes. Very simple. So that has now defined our nav. So anything we put in here will maintain within this area here. We also do the same for content. So div ID content. So again, it's an ID. So we define that with a hash. You also have div classes, which are defined with dots. So for example, you could have a nav div. Sorry, it would be easy to say. You could have a content div, and then you imagine you're doing a newspaper. So you could put, you could essentially put div. Oops, that's not the word. Div class, and then you could put article 1, and it works exactly the same process. Article 1, and then you close the div, and then you have nonsense in there, and then you will essentially have another box here, which is your class. Depends on how you define it in CSS. But that's something that you would use. Some people use it a lot. I don't tend to use classes often, but I know people are probably screaming at me telling me I should. So we're going to go on div content. I'm going to go with exactly the same type of thing, just to kind of give you guys, for those of you that have zero knowledge on this, I think this is a really good way of at least establishing a way in which you can visually see things, because it's easy enough for people to say, oh, we've created a div, and then for anyone that doesn't know what that is, they're looking at a blank screen still. So in our content, the width, let's do it the same. The height is obviously going to be bigger. Let's go with, I don't know. So with content, your height would usually be inherit or auto, sorry. But again, depends on your website. I don't like how long these guys are. Let's go with whoa, that's a big number. Let's go with 1400 to see how it looks. Yeah, I prefer that. As you can see, it looks like turd. This is now our nav, and here we have our content div. Quite clearly, we're not going to want them touching. In some cases, you might. There's nothing stopping you from actually having them touch. You could erase the border between the two. Obviously, they've doubled up there. But to change this, we simply have to put... So you imagine we're looking at this nav bar now. We have to put the margin at the bottom. We want... Let's say we want 30 pixels. This will make sense. There we go. So for those of you that may not have understood that, what we've essentially done is said at the bottom of the nav div, which is this, we want a margin at the bottom of that div of 30 pixels, which is what has spaced this out. So again, for example, let's say we wanted to center this off a little bit. We could say margin left, let's say 50 pixels. And then let's also implement that, whoops, on our content as well. So now what we should see is a change from left, and these should nudge over slightly. There you go. So you could obviously center them off later on. But that's just to give you an idea of what you can do with the margins. At the end of that, we can add our footer. So if we go now to footer, same kind of thing. Usually when making a website, you won't necessarily add borders, like I say. Okay, so now we've done the content, we're going to do the footer. What have I just done? So some people, again, you might not want a footer. I tend to put them at the very bottom of a website. Just, you know, you can put your copyright, you can put your date, all that kind of stuff, but you haven't got to. So let's say, for example, you now want these borders slightly thinner. We can change that by adding here. So border, we want a solid border of, let's say, 2 pixels. And then we can do the same down here. Solid border of 2 pixels. And then we're going to grab this. We're going to copy it. We're going to paste it. Quite clearly, we don't want the height to be as much. So comparing that with this, the height of that is 100 pixels. So our foot is going to be literally be pretty small. So I'm even going to go with 10 pixels here. There we go. So we've got a very, well, I'd do that. It's pretty small. Let's make it a little bit more noticeable. There we go. And then just at the bottom, simply, margin bottom, I'm going to have to say 50 pixels again. Nah, let's say 20. Without the semicolon, it won't work as well. There we go. So as you can see, even though it basically looks like I've done this in Paint, you can see some kind of definition to your website. As soon as we start adding content as well, so we can fill it out a little bit here. So in our content, we can put, yeah, let's leave that P tag there. We can copy all that in. We can also, wait, that's bugging me a lot. There we go. So let's put a H2 in this time and say heading. There you go. So you can see there now that how that maintains within our content div. So now, as you can see, we've defined our website. It looks pants. I know it doesn't look great, but the idea here is for you to get a feel of what each HTML input means, what a div is, and then the footer. So what I'm actually going to do here is alter this because I think it's ugly big. Still ugly big. So as you can see, our content has expanded a little bit and I've shortened this a tad. The only reason I did that is because it looked sillier than it should really. This is kind of giving you an idea of what it would be like. The website is going to be like. It's going to be pretty terrible, as I've said several times. Okay, so here's our very, very stylish website so far. We've got our basic navigation bar. This is something that's probably going to be blank the majority of the series. I'm not that bothered about making a nav bar at the minute. I'm going to implement a search bar in the next episode. I'm also going to link our database to our website as well. So that involves writing a connection string in PHP to the database to establish a connection. Further down the line, we're going to be looking at actually creating a database in something called phpMyAdmin, which thanks to XAMPP is possible. And then several parts down the line, that is when we're going to delve into the hacking lab that we have, that we will be setting up in Cali, and that will basically enable us to attack the hell out of this website and kind of ruin it. That's going to be it for this part, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed. I hope you learned something, and I shall see you in the next part.